This is the 5th part of this manhwa. If you haven't seen the previous chapters, I recommend that you do. The chubby boy trembled on the ground, but the young man only congratulated him, announcing him as a new member of Higuang. After this, the young man took off the uniform he was wearing, giving the order for the rest of the men to take care of it. One of his soldiers informs him that yesterday when the executives went to Gangrak's base the night before, they only found their members on the ground beaten up by the Hangul family, and now the one he sent to rescue, Moon Sung-ho, was on his way to meet him. The boy smiles, jokingly commenting that he told them it wouldn't be easy to deal with them. Then he puts on a jacket while ordering him to get in touch with all the executives because something interesting was going to happen. Those were the words of Shin Woo-sung, the absolute leader of Higuang. In the evening at that church, some girls were crying, begging to be let go, but the man in front of them watched them with a cold gaze, indicating that they should only do what the shop lady told them to do. That imposing man was Oh Chang-yeon, the pastor of Higuang's affiliated church. The girls continued to sob, saying they didn't want to do it because it was very scary, which angered the father, making him shout at them that fugitives like them should stop being so picky. But just when it seemed like he was about to hit them, a man asked him why there was so much noise, surprising Yeon. That was Lee Yoon-hak, a young man with a shaved head who looked at him enigmatically. The boy approached them carefully and asked if they knew each other from the street, which they timidly confirmed. Learning that, Lee Yoon-hak said that since they were acquaintances, he might allow only one of them to go to that place. The black-haired girl, showing that she was volunteering, then asked what would happen to her friend. To which Yoon-hak declared that he would have to beat her to death, and proceeded to slap the blonde girl several times. Horrified, the brown-haired girl asked him to stop and said they would do whatever they were told. Yoon-hak, who hadn't changed his cold expression, said that she would then have to go to the shop, or else her friend would die. Done with this matter, Yeon thanked Yoon-hak at the exit for taking the trouble to handle that situation. To which the boy replied that it was easy since the new runaways believed that the people they knew on the street were their family. Next, the boy entered a room where Shin Woo-sung was gathered with a quite diverse group of people, all sitting around a table. As he sat down, it was revealed that Lee Yoon-hak was one of Higuang's executives, and this was a meeting. A woman with pink lipstick, Ju Aram, assumed that they had gathered to talk about the Hangul family and how they had taken down 3 executives from their group. A chubby guy with a mustache, Seol Bwang-hyuk, commented that they should have gotten rid of them as he recommended at the time, and KW Non-Wul, a punk-looking guy, told him to shut up, saying he didn't even know him to have an opinion like that. Moon Sung-ho added that indeed they should be careful, as he almost died at their hands, a statement that only infuriates Nuna, who says it's not something to be proud of, which the orange-haired guy accepts with his usual smile. Nam Woo-cheng, the second in command with whom Hangul interacted, remains silent, observing the interaction. Wang-hyuk hits the table to comment again that they should go to their house and kill them, something for which they only needed the order from their leader. But Woo-sung indicates that it's best to wait, as the whole situation is quite entertaining, and Cho Hangul is probably quite stressed about it. A week later, the Hangul family was eating at the pizzeria, wondering if it was okay for them to eat so much. Young In-wan, who had started working as Sung-ho's replacement, says they deserved it for what they had done for him. Sung-bin asks if it's okay for them to relax when they're targets of Higuang, to which Deob downplays it, saying they could take them out whenever they wanted. The only one who was silent was Cho Hangul, who hadn't touched a single slice of his pizza. When they were already full, the group left the restaurant, talking about anything, except for Hangul, who was walking behind them. Then, Gaeung looks at a photo booth and suggests they go in because, despite living together, they've never taken a group photo. Something Hangul doesn't agree with, feeling uncomfortable, but Sungbin ends up dragging him inside. In the end, everyone looks at the photos with smiles because of how awkward they turned out. Then, Sungbin hands Hangul a copy, and he can't help but smile when he sees it. That night, the silver-haired guy was smoking a cigarette when Teak approached him, asking directly if something bad had happened because he had noticed he had been in a bad mood these past few days. Hangul doesn't respond but instead asks him how long they've known each other, to which the long-haired guy replies that it's been a couple of years, much longer than Im Dajung, the silver-haired guy comments, causing Teak's confusion. Remembering his meeting with Wu Cheng, he informed him that they had received a request to kill Im Dajung, and were planning to start the job soon. The blonde continues to explain that there are also several members of their organization who wanted to kill the rest of his family, so he offers him the opportunity to save his family of runaways in exchange for delivering Im Dajung to them. This enrages Hangul, and he turns to leave, while Wu Cheng tells him he should think about it because he might lose everything he has in exchange for protecting that kid temporarily. Teek sees that his leader has lost himself in his thoughts, so he calls him by his name, and he only says, smiling, that the longer a relationship, the more valuable it becomes, something that, in a way, Teek agrees with. Hangul decides to enter the house, making it clear that there was nothing to worry about. Subsequently, the silver-haired man goes to the roof, where he thinks he couldn't tell the group about Higuang's offer because he knew they were all very kind and would want to help him. He asserts that if they were to confront them, someone would end up seriously injured or even dead, so he questions whether he should have prevented the protagonist from joining the group in the first place. He looks at the photo taken a couple of hours ago with the family, seeking an answer, and after a few seconds, he tears it apart, keeping a piece in his jacket, stating that there was no other option. In Higuang's church, Li Duan yelled at Ha Iltek for not having killed Dajung as he promised, to which the tattooed guy excuses himself, saying it was complicated because Dajung was now a part of the Hangul family. This isn't enough for Duan, as thanks to Dajung, he could no longer use his legs, so he couldn't bear to see him living peacefully. So, he decides to go right away to talk to the Higuang leader to make him take care of it. Wu Cheng lifts an axe near his face, telling him that even if he's a customer who pays well, he should know the right time to stop, or he could end up in the same place he wanted to send Dajung to. Then, he makes it clear that they will carry out their assignment without any hitches. In a construction area, Cho Hangul was lying on the cold floor, remembering that this was the place where he first met Dajung when he saved him from his bullies, laughing at how he got beaten up at that moment. After a few seconds, he lets out a heavy sigh, wondering how he always ended up involved with boys like him. At the Hangul family's home, Gaeung and Sungbin were arranging clothes on the clothesline, under Cho Hangul's mocking gaze. Of course, this angers the girl, who tries to chase him away, saying it would be better if he left if he wasn't going to help. Hangul, mockingly, stops her but then becomes serious and asks her how she thought things would be if Dajung weren't there. Of course, the question confuses the girl, and after trying to evade the question, she simply says it would be strange because there wouldn't be anyone to fold the socks. An indifferent response that Hangul says would make Dajung sad if he heard it, which further confuses Gaeung and Sungbin. Later, Diob was reproaching Dajung for not washing the dishes when it was his turn today. The protagonist, nervously, excuses himself, saying he was running late for work and didn't have time. But the redhead doesn't accept it and continues to scold him about responsibility until Hangul, who was in the room, intervenes to defend the boy, saying that these things happened. Diob doesn't accept it and tries to continue his monologue, but Hangul stops him, starting to wash the dishes himself. This action surprises everyone present, including the rest of the Hangul family who were in the living room, who didn't believe he would do chores without being told to do so, and Gaeung suggests he must be drunk. The protagonist tries to get him to stop washing, embarrassed, but their leader cuts him off, saying he could rest, something that he finds quite unusual. At dusk, the group was waiting for Hangul who hadn't arrived yet, with Gaeung even buying a lot of meat to cheer him up, noticing that he had been downcast in recent days. But assuming he wouldn't arrive until later, they start eating. After a while, the girl in the group talks about their leader's strange behavior and how he had been treating Dajung better than usual, as if he felt guilty about something, so she asks him directly if he had done something to him, but he denies it. Teek then remembers his previous conversation with his leader where they talked about Dajung, and suggests the possibility that maybe he has a problem. Diob intervenes, saying they know that Hangul was someone who always had proper behavior, despite how carefree he seemed, so they shouldn't doubt him. This clears the group's doubts, including the protagonist, who knows he has come this far thanks to his leader. Hangul walks through the city streets, thinking about how much time had passed. 5 years, that's how long it had been since he first saw him. The silver-haired man thinks as he arrives at Higuang's church, the same place where their relationship began. Upon entering, he comments again with frustration about getting involved with boys like those. Dajung leaves the house, checking if Hangul is coming since it's late, but she doesn't see him, although she does find a piece of cardboard on the ground. In the church, Wu Cheng asks Hangul if he has an answer, something that the silver-haired man confirms, mentally apologizing to Dajung for doing the only thing he could. At the same time, the protagonist looks at the cardboard and, with surprise, sees that it's part of the photo they took that day, the piece corresponding to Hangul's face. At that moment, Hangul gives his answer, getting into an attacking position and stating that he won't choose between any of them. Wu Cheng responds mockingly that he's making a mistake, but Hangul demands that he bring Wu Sung. The blonde guy, mockingly, orders his men to attack their superior from Higuang, something that Hangul expected, and for which he mentally apologizes to Dajung for not keeping his promise to take care of him until the end. The Hangul family had gathered, informed by Dajung of his discovery. The protagonist nervously asks if they believe that this piece of the photo could be related to the reason why Hangul hadn't returned yet. Silence, no one had the answer. Sungbin questions that even if something bad were happening, he could possibly handle it himself given who he is. Teak agrees with the latter, saying that Hangul isn't someone who acts recklessly, so they shouldn't worry. Dajung agrees, but the feeling of discomfort still lingers. In the church, the group of soldiers attacks Hangul on Wu Chang's order, and under the gaze of the other executive, Bu Yunjiu, who was interested in seeing if the rumors surrounding Hangul were true. At that moment, one of Higuang's soldiers was about to strike him with an iron bar, but the silver-haired man dodges it by jumping, causing it to hit someone else by mistake. From the air, he takes the opportunity to kick Yunjiu in the face, rendering him unconscious. Obviously, this surprises everyone present, but the group is still confident due to their numerical advantage and charges at him. In just a few seconds, he manages to evade these men armed with bats and knock them out with a single blow each. The rest of the soldiers tremble at his actions, calling him a monster. Hangul challenges them to come closer, but none of them do. It's Wu Chang who attacks him with a blow that the silver-haired man manages to block, while Wu Chang tells him that there are still traces of his old self living within him. Seeing that the executive intervened, one of Higuang's soldiers smiles, thinking that with the leader's help, they could defeat him together. However, he ends up eating his words when several men advance to attack him, and Hangul manages to perform a series of agile moves that defeat them all, while facing off against Wu Chang. All of this without even breaking a sweat. This frustrates the henchman, making him wonder why he should be afraid when they have such an overwhelming advantage. After finishing off all the lackeys who approached him, Hangul attacks Wu Chang and tells him, once again, to bring Shin Wusung because he has no chance against him. At that moment, he notices how the blonde guy exposes his neck, but instead of attacking, he suspects this opening and takes a big leap backward, just in time to dodge an attack from another newly arrived executive, Guang Hyuk. He wasn't the only one. Huan Wuel, Ju Aram, Moon Sung-ho, who greets him mockingly, and a person who also tells him that they are happy to see him, Shin Wusung. All the executives were in the room with the reinforcement of countless Higuang members, but Hangul only furrows his brow at the sight of his ex-friend. The leader of the organization admits that he is surprised that Hangul came alone to this place, and because of this foolish choice, he and his whole family will die. The silver-haired man mutters angrily that he couldn't believe what he had become, and Wusung tells him not to delude himself, as his current self was the answer to everything. But he didn't want to have a conversation about their past, so he orders to kill him and bring him before him. All the executives attack Hangul, and he has little to do but raise his fists, although he is still struck by a couple of blows. A Higuang member looks amazed at the scene, praising the enemy's strength, but with the certainty that it was impossible for him to survive such an attack. And just at that moment, for the first time in history, a blow to the head makes Hangul bleed. The leader could only watch Shin Wusung, and, remembering his friends, wonder if there was any trace of his old self left. Wusung just looks at the beating he's receiving and scoffs, saying he wasn't as strong as he used to be. Guang Hyuk unleashes a flurry of punches, claiming that he was actually weak. At that moment, Hangul grabs him by the face, his face covered in blood, and says he'll stop because he's getting angry. Everyone watches in surprise as Hangul tells his ex-friend that it seems he won't stop, so he'll have to stop him. Focusing back on Hangul, it's shown that he had Guang Hyuk by the neck, with his face battered and unconscious. "One of us will have to die for this to end," is the statement Hangul gives to his ex-friend. That night, in the moonlight, Dajung walked through the city streets until he reached a construction site, murmuring Hangul's name. Since he was getting nervous because he hadn't returned yet, he decided to go out and look for him, with no results so far. Looking at that place, memories of when Hangul first saved him come flooding back, noticing that it had been a long time since they first met, although it felt like it was just yesterday. This, along with looking at the piece of Hangul's photo, comforts him in some way, and he trusts that the group must be right, and their leader is on some long-term trip. But when he was about to return home, a voice shouting for him to stop catches his attention. In Higuang's church, Hangul only asks for his next opponent, once he throws Guang Hyuk's unconscious body to the ground. No one moves, but Wusung scolds Hangul for his arrogance in thinking he could win, and tells him that the organization had changed a lot since he left. Then he tries to show him the level of loyalty and obedience of his members by ordering Xiao Guang Hyuk to get up, but he only twitches. Hangul comments with obviousness that it will probably be hard for him to get up in the following days, but Wusung ignores him and continues to call his henchmen, even threatening to kill him. It's this last warning that manages to make the man wake up and get up while apologizing to his boss. He can still fight is the statement Wusung gives before threatening all the others on the floor, saying that if they didn't fight like they were going to die, he would kill them himself. So everyone gets up and attacks an intrigued Hangul who didn't understand how these guys, who almost seemed dead a few minutes ago, could fight and even seemed to have sharpened their killer instincts. While fighting them, he defends himself from a powerful blow from Gwanghyuk when Woo-sung sadistically tells him that this is the Gwanghyuk he has created, making Hangul wonder what kind of hellish acts he had been doing. Suddenly, Hangul remembers several moments with Woo-sung when they were young. Going out to eat together, their playful fights on the street, the times they fell asleep in the same bed with their fingers in each other's mouths to tease each other, or when they genuinely looked happy taking a picture together. It's these memories that make Hangul lament that things have to be this way now. Outside of this church was Dajung, and he looked towards it as a girl ran from a man with glasses, who promised to kill the brown-haired girl if he caught her. Not knowing them, Dajung wonders if he should help the girl, after recalling everything he went through with Hwan and his father. He didn't want to cause the same problems, so he tries to help by making everything look like an accident. And when the pastor was running, Dajung puts his foot out for him to trip, hoping it would be enough to give the girl a chance to escape. However, when he looks away, he realizes that the girl was caught by 3 other thugs, so he resigns himself to intervene when Lee Yoon-hak pushes his way through, muttering that it's better if he gets lost, as this matter has nothing to do with him. Speaking with the pastor, the boy comments that the girl turned out to be much more annoying than he expected, as she took advantage of Cho Hangul causing a commotion to escape. Dajung hears this and is shocked, but Yoon-hak doesn't pay attention to him and only approaches the girl, muttering that annoying girls like her needed to be punished. The protagonist stops in his tracks, taking him by the shoulder and asking him what he said about Hangul earlier. In the church, Hangul was defending himself from a double kick courtesy of Kwon and Sungho, while also keeping an eye on a group of thugs who wanted to attack him from behind. Quickly, Hangul disarms one of the lackeys and hits the rest with his weapon before throwing one of them toward Gwanghyuk, who is embarrassed that Woo-sung saw him, so he attacks Hangul to charge and squeeze him, incapacitating him so that the others can beat him, even if they also hit him. It's a clearly crazy action that Hangul condemns. In those seconds of struggle, it can be seen that Kim Hee-eun approached Hangul and stabbed him in the leg. Furious at the situation, Hangul performs a small flip that allows him to kick Hee-eun and Gwanghyuk. When he's on the ground, he scolds Woo-sung for even recruiting young guys like Hee-eun to stab others. But the black-haired guy remains unfazed and tells him that since his departure, he has managed to turn Hee-gwang into a major underworld organization that makes a lot of money. An achievement he attributes to Hangul and thanks him for, stating that none of that would have happened without him. He reminds him that it all started 5 years ago when those guys were beating him up in an alley near the church, and he intervened to save his life, setting off a chain reaction that put him where he is now. So, mockingly, he tells him that he should have let him die, causing a great sense of helplessness in the other guy. 5 years ago, a 14-year-old Shin Woo-sung went to the church every day to beg God to save him from the hellish life he had, being beaten up every day by bullies. To his prayer, it seemed that heaven had sent Cho Hangul to save him, who invited him to live with him to help him. In the present, Hangul admits that he never should have taken him to that guy, but the black-haired guy dismisses it, saying that today he would send him to that guy. The statement triggers an increase in his anger, causing him to run towards him, but his leg injury prevents him from moving correctly, and because of this disadvantage, Sungho gets a chance to attack him, making him stagger back. And then he mocks how his arrogance prevents him from matching him as the last time, while releasing a flurry of punches that his opponent does nothing but block. Words that infuriate Hangul even more, who is sure he could deal with idiots like him if he didn't have an injury like that in his leg. Things get worse when Kwon holds him from behind, giving Sungho an even better chance to attack. In his head, Hangul scolds himself for getting to this point because he had gone to end all this because of him. With this thought, he gathers the strength to break free from Kwon's grip and starts running, affirming that it didn't matter if he died or what it cost him. He would make sure to get Woo-sung out of there. Precisely as he escapes, Woo-sung orders them to catch him, and a group of lackeys tracks him down. But even limping and at his maximum, Hangul is able to defeat all those who were chasing him down the hallway, much to the surprise of the thugs. However, Kwon doesn't let them give up and reminds them of their leader's threat to kill them if they didn't finish off Hangul first. And at that point, all those who were unconscious get up and, along with the rest, beat Hangul with their weapons until they lead him to a new room. Hangul breathes heavily, sure that he couldn't keep spending energy on them or he would be in trouble. But his thoughts are interrupted when he sees a girl lying on the floor behind him, murmuring that she didn't want to go to the store, a comment that completely infuriates Hangul as he realizes that he used the runaway teen seeking refuge for his own purposes. Still, he apologizes to the girl for not being able to help her since he didn't have enough energy to rescue them both. At that moment, Woosun arrives with the others, mocking his friend's escape attempts. He is interrupted by the girl on the floor, who, on her knees, begs him to let her go. Although Woosun is indignant that the girl was not taken to the store and that she is in such bad shape when he ordered to filter out these kinds of women. With that said, he stabs the girl, stating that the quality of his products will decrease, causing Hangul to shout at him with hatred. Woosun mocks his inability to let people like her go, assuming that maybe they remind him of those people he couldn't save. The girl, agonizing, continues to murmur that she didn't want to die, which causes Hangul to remember a time when Woosun also begged for his life in a scene engulfed in flames. As in that memory, Hangul understands that if he didn't save her now, she would bleed to death. He understands that it's very possible that he might die, but he continues to think about the possibility of rescuing the girl and saving them both. He wasn't sure what to do, but the memory of a name comforts him, that of an Ajasi, a term used to refer to an older person. Back to Dajung. He tries to interrogate Yunhak while still holding his shoulder, questioning him about what he said about Cho Hangul fighting in his own way. Yunhak doesn't respond to this but instead breaks free from the grip with a precise punch to the face, then launches a series of powerful attacks that the protagonist can barely defend against. Yunhak reproaches him for not having the right to yell at him, but Dajung ignores him and tries to land a blow, which the executive manages to evade and respond with a powerful kick that, to his surprise, he catches, making it clear to Yunhak that Dajung knows how to fight. Now curious, he stops his attacks and asks Dajung who he is, but he maintains his stance of wanting to know what's happening with Cho Hangul, to which the executive asks why he was so interested in him, and Dajung reveals that he is their leader, making it clear to Yunhak that this guy is part of the Hangul family. Therefore, for the first time, his cold expression changes to a sadistic smile as he reveals that his Hyung will die very soon, as he stormed into He Guang's base and was fighting alone against everyone to protect his runaway family. The protagonist is in shock, and Yunhak mockingly questions whether it wouldn't have been better if he had accepted the deal they offered him earlier. Dajun can't take it anymore and launches a new punch that his opponent avoids by ducking and then counters, wanting to make it clear that he's not at his level. Although in the end, the protagonist manages to return a punch to his face just as he manages to hit him, making him wonder if he's capable of feeling his blows. The protagonist yells at him to get out of the way, but the executive continues his barrage of punches, which are not enough to incapacitate Dajung, who insults him to let him pass. Next comes an exchange of blows between the two, while the protagonist wonders why Hangul wanted to sacrifice himself for them when he hadn't yet had a chance to repay him for all the help he had given him. In the compound, Cho Hangul continued to defeat everyone who stood in his way, even Kwon, who was on the floor bleeding, wondering if that guy ever got tired. The only one who didn't seem impressed was Woo-sung, who commented with disappointment that he seemed quite unfocused, far from killing him as he had promised before. Hangul replies that he will finish him quickly, so Woo-sung realizes that he wants to escape with the girl, something that Hangul regrets him noticing, as there wasn't much time left for her. His opponent continues to taunt him, asking if he wanted to be like the one from that unknown Ajasi, a kind of mother to all the street kids he picks up. This provokes great fury in Hangul, and Woo-sung takes advantage of it to order his men to kill the girl. Loneliness, that is the feeling that Hangul most remembers experiencing in his life, as he grew up in an orphanage where he was abandoned by his parents when he was 5 years old. He was everyone's target, and no one cared what happened to him, so at the age of 14, he dropped out of school, not before breaking the faces of all his bullies. Although his life as a fugitive had several drawbacks, including facing several gangsters, at least he was satisfied not having to deal with annoying adults. He convinced himself that he was fine alone, without company, although it doesn't seem to be true when he watches a happy family walking with their son. It was then, coming out of a store while smoking, that he met a strange man who hit him on the forehead, scolding him for smoking in his hardware store, contaminating everything. A man with facial hair and some overweight named Ma Tibium. When Hangul tries to defend himself, the man keeps saying that it was disrespectful to smoke in front of his store without at least offering him a cigarette. Then, without further notice, he takes the cigarette from his hand and starts smoking it while mocking him. This action astonishes Hangul, making him wonder what was wrong with this Ajasi. After this, Tibium assumes that he ran away because he had a very pathetic face, just like that of a beggar, and proceeds to tell him that a brat like him shouldn't be on the streets. His words anger Hangul, so he decides to leave, commenting that he talks too much. Tibium stops him, saying that if he had nowhere to go, he could go to his house. Curious, the gray-haired man goes with him, and in his place, he finds other much younger children who warmly welcome Tibium. Apparently, this Ajasi had the habit of taking care of kids who had nowhere to go while running his hardware store, something he did with Hangul as well, inviting him to consider this place as his home. However, Hangul rejected all the invitations to join them due to the deep-seated distrust he developed during his youth, and not being used to that kind of warmth. That's why he ended up running away from that place and returning to the streets, where, eventually, he ended up facing a large mafia group that swept the floor with him. Although they offered him to work for them, and he had no morals at the time, Hangul was so tired of life that he didn't mind provoking them to see if they could stab him. He succeeded, but when he had a knife inches from his face, Tibium arrived to grab the weapon, stopping them, and scolding them for wanting to attack a child, and getting angry enough to make them leave Hangul alone and attack him instead. A move that ends up working, causing the mafia members to leave but leaving Tibium in a destroyed state. So Hangul scolds him for his stupidity when the man only reproaches him for getting involved with them in the first place and, with tears on his bloody face, begs him not to do something like that again. This was the first time Hangul remembers that someone cried for him, and the first time since he ran away that he genuinely felt happy. After this, he decided to stay with Ma Tibium, treating him as if he were his own father, and resulting in his life as a runaway becoming less difficult. One day, the Ajasi tells him that he used to wander the streets, just like him, when he was his age, which is why whenever he saw someone lost, he couldn't help but help them. The man admits that things were tough back then, but thanks to the help he received from the neighborhood people, he was able to get through it, and things no longer seemed so lonely or difficult. For Tibium, no matter how hard life is, it can be enjoyable if there's someone trustworthy by your side. That's why he wanted to convince Hangul that he would always be by his side, no matter what. Back to the present, Hangul managed to defeat all the men who approached the bleeding girl. The gray-haired man tries to encourage her to hang on, telling her that while living a life as a runaway, there will be difficult days. But even in the worst situations, you can get through it if there's someone reliable by your side. And, at that moment, he was by her side, so he asks her to trust him. Yunhak furrows his brow and tells his friend that such a weak mentality is a dangerous thing in places like that. Something Hangul agrees with, but admits that he couldn't help having it, maybe because he resembled his Ajasi so much, or because he showed him until his last day the kind of things that mattered most, and that's why he would always follow the same path. Nonsense is how Yunhak describes everything Hangul said. Completely furious, he orders his men to kill the gray-haired man in 5 minutes, or else he would do it with his own hands. The Higuang gang rushes toward him at the same time, and, unlike previous times, these guys manage to land several attacks on Hangul. The gray-haired man feels his limbs heavy, he can hardly move, and wonders if that's all he can give. Suddenly, the room's lights go out. None of the boys can see, so they stop attacking. Suddenly, one by one, they fall to the floor, although it's not because of Hangul, who is as confused as the rest. Then, Dajung touches his shoulder and, in whispers, indicates that they must leave. Minutes earlier, the protagonist was fighting Yunhak, and, due to the strength of the attacks, he assumes he was one of the executives. Understanding the levels he needed to reach to defeat him, and knowing that he didn't have time to waste if he wanted to help Yunhak, he decides to take an attack to grab dirt from the floor and throw it in Yunhak's face, completely blinding his vision. Then, Dajung takes advantage of easily defeating the other Higuang members, and under the pastor's gaze, he takes the girl to escape. Once they are far away, the protagonist tells the girl to go, as he needed to go to the church. After thanking him, the girl asks him as a favor to save her friend who was still there. After entering stealthily, Dajung could see how Hangul faced everyone, noticing that he was trying to protect the friend of the other girl. It was while looking around the area that he found the fuse box that he used to help them escape, leading us to the current events. When Hangul has the protagonist in front of him, he mentally wonders why he had to be in the same place as Shin Wusung. He remembers when he met Wusung. He was defending himself with a brick from his attackers, but he was still beaten by them, just like him Dajung did at the time. He just wanted to help Wusung because of the efforts he was making, but when he did, just like Tibium did with him, he realized he had nowhere to die, so he took him home. When he brought him before the Ajasi, he accepted without hesitation, and Wusung easily began living in the store called Hardware Higuang. Woo-sung quickly adapted to living in the store, and since they were the same age, they ended up becoming best friends. During those happy days, Woo-sung began talking about wanting revenge, and he asked him to teach him how to fight, something he accepted, as he had no reason to refuse. So, he achieved the revenge he wanted against his bullies shortly after, and it seemed like everything was fine until he got drunk with power. He spent his time fighting anyone, just like Hangul did, even getting involved with the mafia. Although, unlike what he did, Woo-sung formed his own group, starting to recruit and promote it in the underworld, as if he had found his purpose in life. Gradually, his violence began to exceed a limit, until Taebyum himself scolded him for it. Yoonhak ignored him, and there were consequences. One day, when Hangul and he were returning to the Higuang store, they found the place in flames. It was an orchestrated attack by the mafia, as punishment because Aujasi had refused to pay protection fees, and Taebyum had an accident while trying to protect the children he cared for with his last breath. Worried, Hangul approached the body of his father, who was barely alive. Taebyum apologized to him for not being able to fulfill his promise to always be by his side to protect him. But with his last breath, he asked him not to live a solitary life even if he was no longer there. That day, Hangul lost Taebyum and the children. He lost his entire family. After that, he began living a miserable lifestyle, with no reason to be alive, until Woo-sung proposed a plan to protect others, just as his Aujasi did with them. Hangul trusted him, as it seemed that Woo-sung had returned to his old self with Taebyum's death. In this way, both inherited Ma Taebyum's will and created Higuang in his honor. They created a base where everyone could stay, and to ensure that they didn't end up like their previous family, the organization decided to confront the mafia, always led by Hangul and Woo-sung, who were the perfect duo capable of defeating anyone. Things were going well until the truth came to light. While Hangul was beating up a mafia member, he scolded him for confronting them when they had paid for their services before, revealing that it was Shin Woo-sung who planned the fire at the Higuang store. Upon learning this, he immediately went against his best friend and punched him in the face, trying to get him to tell him why he carried out that attack when Taebyum had treated them like family. Without remorse, Woo-sung tells him that he did it for the money as he finally had a good business, and Taebyum had become a hindrance to him, sentencing that he should never have tried to stop him and cause so much commotion, or else he would still be alive. Indignant, Hangul asks him how he could do it for such a simple reason, but Woo-sung tells him that, in reality, for that very reason, he was still trapped with them. When he says he will kill him, KW-non and Yoonhak grab him by the arms to stop him, making it clear that they will follow Woo-sung. The black-haired boy gets up and reveals that they had all been receiving payments behind his back, and that to avoid dying, money was much more important than family. Furthermore, he explains that thanks to their efforts, they had weakened the mafia and would soon be able to separate from them, something he thanked him for. It was after that Hangul left Higuang when he lost everything he had. That's why, in his mind, he prayed that he wouldn't live in that hellish world. In the present, what he asks the protagonist is to take the girl and go, as he had to stay behind to block the group's path, as he wouldn't be able to move comfortably while carrying her body. Dajun points out that he wouldn't be able to do it because of his injuries, but the gray-haired man tries to cut the discussion short, pointing out the girl's loss of blood. Dajun wants to stay and fight with him, but Hangul demands that he just go and, as an incentive, asks him to trust him. The protagonist, trusting him completely, promises to come back, so he asks her to hold on until then. The mafia members move in the shadows with their flashlights when they notice Dajun running away with the girl, and try to stop them, but Hangul hits them to confront them. In his mind, the gray-haired man pleads with the protagonist to keep saving people and never become someone like Shin Woo-sung. Before he finishes leaving, Hangul shouts to Dajun to get his attention and asks him to live well with the rest of the group, promising that they will see each other later. The protagonist wonders why Hangul would say something like that, thinking that maybe he should go back to help him. However, he quickly prioritizes the safety of the girl behind him, whom he needs to take to a hospital urgently. Then, he would look for the fugitive family so that they could all help their leader. Meanwhile, in the enclosure, Hangul was still facing all the boys who were trying to attack him, managing to evade each attack with monstrous efficiency. Woo-sung watches that and calls him a natural fighter, recalling how even when he was young, he was able to annihilate a large part of the mafia alongside him, admitting that he was someone truly terrifying in the past. However, it wasn't just because of strength that Higuang got so far. After Hangul left the organization, they were able to defeat the remaining faction of the mafia and absorb them into their ranks, a task accomplished by their executives. And that's how the 5th part of this manhwa ends. If you have reached this part of the video, let me tell you that you have been one of the few people to make it here. So comment the word revenge in the comments. Remember to subscribe to not miss any videos. With that said, see you in the next video.